A single explosive comment from Jimin shatters Jungkook's composure during a live broadcast. What follows spirals into betrayal, hidden truths, and emotional collapse. "You think you're the only one who's broken." Jimin's voice cut through the studio like a blade, sharp and cold, and before the cameraman could react, the live feed caught Jungkook's water bottle flying across the room and smashing against the wall. The crack echoed, louder than any word spoken that night. Silence. Stunned staff froze, viewers at home held their breath, and Taehyung's fingers twitched slightly on the armrest as his eyes darted between the two men. Jungkook stood, chest heaving, jaw clenched so hard a vein bulged on his neck. The fluorescent studio lights bounced off his trembling hands. He hadn't meant to lose control. Not here. Not like this. But Jimin had touched a nerve buried so deep, so raw even Jungkook didn't know it still bled. The interview was supposed to be a reunion, a celebration of 10 years of friendship, music, and survival. What the world didn't know was how fractured that brotherhood had become behind the polished smiles and coordinated outfits. "Cut the cameras," Namjoon's voice commanded, firm and low, but the damage was done. Twitter was already exploding, clips going viral within seconds. Jungkook didn't look at anyone as he walked out, his footsteps thunderous against the hollow floor. His vision blurred with rage or maybe shame. He couldn't tell anymore. Behind him, Jimin's eyes didn't blink. He sat still, lips slightly parted as if regretting it or maybe finally breathing. That moment wasn't an accident. It was years of silence, resentment, and masked pain erupting all at once. 3 hours later, Jungkook was still driving. The city blurred past like it didn't want to witness his unraveling. He replayed Jimin's words again and again, each syllable twisting deeper like a screw against bone. "You think you're the only one who's broken." Did he mean Busan, the tour in 2019? Or that night in Tokyo, when everything changed and none of them had the courage to admit it? His hands gripped the wheel until his knuckles turned white. Memories surged, Jimin crying backstage, refusing to explain why. Jungkook outside his hotel door at 3 a.m., fists pressed to the wood, never knocking. Taehyung's silence when asked if something happened. They had all swallowed things too big to name, but the truth doesn't stay buried. It waits festering beneath performances, laughter, award speeches until someone dares to speak. And Jimin had spoken, not with a scream, not with tears, but with a calm, quiet sentence that decimated Jungkook's carefully built control. He parked at the edge of Han River, engine still running. The wind was brutal, slapping his face as he stepped out, needing air like a drowning man. His phone buzzed. Dozens of missed calls, 1 from his brother, 2 from HYBA, 7 from Taehyung. But none from Jimin. He stared at the river, feeling like it might swallow him whole if he stepped too close. Behind him, the city pulsed, alive, oblivious, unforgiving. His fame couldn't shield him tonight. His body might still be sculpted, voice still golden, but inside something had cracked, something primal. He wasn't angry because Jimin had lied. He was angry because Jimin was right. That comment didn't just expose his pain, it forced him to face how much of it was his own doing. The roles they played in each other's hurt. And maybe, just maybe, he wasn't the victim he thought he was. Somewhere, deep beneath the fury, that realization scared him more than anything. "You're not going to answer any of them." Taehyung's voice broke the silence in the hotel suite, his phone vibrating non-stop on the coffee table, the screen lighting up with Jungkook's name over and over again. Jimin sat slouched on the couch, a cigarette burning low between his fingers. He hadn't smoked in years, but tonight made it feel necessary. He took a long drag before answering, voice cold. "He's not calling to talk, he's calling to scream. Let him cool off." Taehyung stared at him, disbelief etched across his usually calm features. "You humiliated him in front of millions, Jimin. That wasn't just a comment, you knew what you were doing." Jimin laughed bitterly. "Humiliated him. He walks around acting like he's the only one who's ever been hurt. You remember Tokyo, right? You remember how he left?" The air shifted instantly. Taehyung's jaw tensed, his hands curling into fists. "Don't bring that up unless you're ready to finish the story." Jimin stood, his frame tense as he moved toward the window, the city below flickering with indifferent lights. "No one's ready, that's the problem." Meanwhile, Jungkook was packing inside the underground studio at HYBE, his voice hoarse from shouting at staff, at managers, at himself. I told you I didn't want him on the same panel, he snapped at their coordinator, who looked like she wanted to disappear. You said it was fine 3 days ago, she mumbled. Jungkook whipped around, eyes blazing. 3 days ago, I still had some goddamn faith in him. Namjoon stepped in then, always the mediator, always the calm in their storm. Jungkook, he said carefully, you don't mean that, sit down, please. Jungkook ignored the chair and instead slammed his fist against the console table, a thud reverberating through the room. He used me. He used something I told him in confidence, on live broadcast. Namjoon didn't flinch. And why do you think he did that? The question cut deeper than any insult. Jungkook's silence was long, trembling, dangerous, because I left. The confession spilled out like poison. I left when he needed me and I thought time would fix it, but it didn't. It only made him sharper. Back at the hotel, Jimin was scrolling through the hate online, reading each word like a punishment. Traitor, snake, emotional manipulator. His hands were steady, but his stomach twisted. He's trending #1 worldwide, Taehyung said, watching him carefully. Not because of his music. Jimin met his gaze. You think I don't know that? His voice cracked for the first time. You think I wanted this? You think I enjoyed watching him break like that? Then why did you do it? Taehyung snapped. Why say that on camera? Jimin's lips trembled before he clenched his jaw. Because I was tired of pretending, tired of watching him play the hero while I carry every wound in silence. Taehyung's anger gave way to something softer, pity maybe, or guilt. We all carry wounds, Jimin. You just chose to bleed in front of the world. That night, Jungkook released a statement, cold, professional, clearly written by legal, but his fans knew better. His words were too hollow, his tone too forced. It only made them more curious, more ravenous. By morning, clips had been slowed down, analyzed frame by frame. Lip readers decoded the whispers exchanged before the outburst. Fan theories flooded the internet. One in particular went viral, a time-stamped video from 2019 Tokyo. A performance where Jungkook was caught wiping tears backstage with Jimin running after him, only to stop, hesitate, and turn back. The clip reignited rumors long buried. A secret fallout, a hidden relationship, a betrayal. The fandom was divided. Some defended Jimin, saying he had every right to speak up. Others painted him as a villain, a saboteur. Inside HYBE, the tension was suffocating. Executives demanded damage control. Managers tried scheduling a private sit-down between Jungkook and Jimin. Neither agreed. Taehyung took matters into his own hands. 2 nights later, he showed up uninvited at Jungkook's apartment, his face unreadable. We're fixing this, he said before Jungkook could protest. I booked the rooftop studio, now. I'm not ready to see him, Jungkook muttered. Taehyung raised an eyebrow. Then you better get ready fast. Because if you two don't talk, everything we built, everything is going to burn. Reluctantly, Jungkook followed. The rooftop studio was empty except for Jimin, already seated, his eyes heavy-lidded, voice low. You came. I didn't come for you, Jungkook hissed. I came for the group. Jimin nodded. Then talk. Talk, Jungkook laughed dryly. You want to talk now, after putting my trauma on display like a damn Netflix special. I didn't say anything you haven't said to me in private, Jimin countered, voice rising. The only difference is now the world knows you're not perfect. You think this is about being perfect? Jungkook took a step forward, fury boiling. I told you about that night because I trusted you, because I thought you were the only one who would understand. And I did, Jimin shouted. I understood too well, because you weren't the only one dying inside, Jungkook. I was there too, but no one asked me how I felt, not once. So you decided to make me the villain, Jungkook growled, to expose me so you could finally get sympathy. No. Jimin whispered, I exposed you so I could finally breathe. The room fell silent. Both were shaking, not from rage anymore, but from exhaustion, from years of swallowing everything unsaid. I thought we were supposed to protect each other, Jungkook said quietly. We were, Jimin replied, but somewhere along the way protecting you meant destroying myself. For the first time in days, Jungkook looked at him, really looked. And what he saw wasn't malice, it was heartbreak, regret, loneliness. Emotions he knew too well. He opened his mouth to say something, but before he could, the studio door opened. Taehyung walked in, holding a phone, his face pale. We have a bigger problem, he said grimly. That Tokyo video, it's not just a clip anymore. Someone leaked the full footage. And just like that, everything shifted again. "Turn it off," Jungkook said. But his eyes never left the screen, the leaked Tokyo footage playing in ruthless clarity as if time itself had decided to testify against them. The room smelled faintly of dust and cold metal, the hum of the rooftop studio lights buzzing like a warning. On the screen, a younger Jungkook stood in the hallway outside Jimin's hotel room, hair damp with sweat, eyes red-rimmed, his knuckles hovering inches from the door before falling back to his sides. The timestamp glowed mercilessly in the corner. 02:47 a.m. "You walked away," Jimin said quietly, not accusing, not forgiving, just stating a fact that had lived between them for years. Jungkook flinched as if struck. "You don't know what I was thinking." Jimin laughed under his breath, a sound sharp enough to cut. "I know exactly what you were thinking. You were thinking if you stayed, you break. So you let me break alone." Taehyung stepped between them instinctively, palms raised. "This is not helping." "No," Jimin snapped, eyes blazing now, emotions finally unchained. "This is the first time it's honest." Jungkook's voice trembled as he shot back. "You think I didn't want to knock? You think I didn't stand there replaying everything you'd said to me that night? I was terrified." "Terrified of what?" Jimin challenged. "Of loving me." The word hung heavy, controversial, undeniable. Taehyung's breath caught. Jungkook froze. The city outside seemed to mute itself, as if Seoul itself was leaning in to listen. "Don't twist this," Jungkook whispered. "I didn't twist anything," Jimin replied, stepping closer, their faces now inches apart. "You said it yourself back then. You said if anyone ever found out how deep this went, everything would fall apart." Jungkook clenched his fists. "Because it would have, because it still will." Jimin's eyes glistened, anger bleeding into hurt. "Then why does it hurt so much that you left?" Silence roared. Taehyung finally broke it, voice shaking. "The footage is everywhere. Fans are dissecting every second. HYBE's emergency board is meeting in 30 minutes. This isn't just personal anymore." Jungkook ran a hand through his hair, packing like a caged animal. "They'll spin it. They always do." "They can't spin this," Jimin said bitterly. "Not when they see your face, not when they see mine." His phone buzzed violently in his pocket. A message from the CEO. Mandatory attendance. Immediately. The drive to the building was suffocating, the silence inside the car thicker than any argument. Jungkook stared out the window, watching neon lights smear like tears across the glass. "If they ask," he said suddenly, "I'll deny it." Jimin turned to him slowly, disbelief etched deep. "You'll deny me again?" Jungkook swallowed hard. "I'll protect the group." "By erasing me," Jimin shot back. They arrived to a room full of suits and sterile smiles, the air heavy with controlled panic. Screens displayed trending graphs, headlines screaming speculation, betrayal, forbidden closeness. One executive cleared his throat. "This situation is volatile. We need unity." Jimin laughed, humorless. "Unity after years of silence." Another voice cut in, sharp and decisive. "We issue a joint statement. Emotional misunderstanding, stress, nothing more." Jungkook nodded automatically, survival instinct kicking in. Jimin stared at him, something in his eyes cracking. "Say it," Jimin said softly. "Say it never meant anything." Jungkook opened his mouth. The words hovered, poisonous and familiar. But then he remembered the hallway, the door, his cowardice reflected back at him in brutal HD. "I can't," he said hoarsely. Gasps rippled across the table. The CEO's face hardened. "Think carefully." Jungkook stood. "I have been thinking carefully for years, and it's killing us." Jimin's breath hitched. For the first time, hope flickered through his pain, but it was fragile. Dangerous. The room erupted into overlapping voices, threats, warnings, consequences. Outside, the world waited, hungry. Jungkook reached for Jimin's wrist under the table, grounding himself. Jimin didn't pull away. For a brief, terrifying moment, they were on the same side again, and that terrified everyone else in the room far more than any scandal ever could. "You've just signed our death sentence." The CEO's voice thundered across the room, slicing through the stunned silence that followed Jungkook's quiet rebellion. Jungkook didn't flinch. His hand remained loosely wrapped around Jimin's wrist beneath the conference table, a tether he hadn't even realized he needed until now. The room buzzed with executives scrambling to control the uncontrollable. PR heads whispered frantically into phones. Legal advisors tapped keyboards like they could edit reality. But nothing could undo what had just happened. Jimin looked at Jungkook with something close to disbelief. "You're not backing out?" he asked, voice low, eyes searching. Jungkook met his gaze without blinking. Not this time. The CEO slammed a folder onto the table. Do you understand what this means? Sponsors pulling out, contracts frozen, potential blacklisting. You're not two rookies in a basement group anymore. Every move you make is a broadcast to millions. Jimin stood, pulling his wrist free gently, eyes burning. Then let them watch. Let them finally see who we are instead of who they painted us to be. A murmur rippled through the executives, shock, maybe disgust. One older board member narrowed his eyes. Are you admitting to a relationship? Jungkook exhaled slowly. I'm admitting that I was never honest about who mattered to me most. If that costs me my career, then maybe I never owned it to begin with. The CEO barked a laugh. You'll be sued. You'll be crucified online. They'll label you manipulative, unstable. Then let them, Jimin snapped. Let them try. The tension was unbearable, like wires stretched too tight. Taehyung stood off to the side, arms crossed, jaw tense. You two need to think long-term, he said carefully. This isn't just about feelings. This is about survival. Do you want to make music again? Or do you want to be remembered for this? Jungkook turned to him, voice low but razor-sharp. Music without honesty is just noise. Jimin added, and I've had enough of noise to last a lifetime. Later that night, the world was chaos. News broke across every major platform, speculations confirming what fans had debated for years. The Tokyo footage, the rooftop confrontation, the conference leak. None of it could be contained anymore. We should release our own statement, Jimin said, scrolling through the flood of hate, support, and disbelief. Something real, not corporate. Jungkook nodded, packing the hotel suite. No filters, no spin. Just truth, Jimin whispered, even if it breaks us. They sat side by side, writing it out line by line, each word heavier than the last. They admitted to emotional entanglement, late-night confessions, unspoken boundaries blurred long before either of them understood the cost. They didn't label it. They didn't romanticize it. They told the truth. The post went live at 2:19 a.m. Within minutes, it crashed the platform. Comments poured in, some venomous, some sobbing, others stunned into silence. But none of it mattered more than what happened next. A former manager leaked a message thread, screenshots of a private chat from 2020. In it, Jungkook had begged to take a hiatus after Tokyo, citing mental health. The request had been denied. The thread confirmed everything: the silence, the burnout, the fracture. And then another leak. Security footage of Jungkook in a hospital waiting room, eyes swollen, knuckles bloodied, packing outside Jimin's ER room after a collapse in Osaka the following year. No one had known, not even fans. The pieces began connecting in the public's mind. Suddenly, the narrative shifted. They weren't saboteurs, they were survivors, but not everyone wanted that story told. That morning, an anonymous whistleblower inside the company sent an encrypted file to multiple news outlets. Its contents: internal emails, cover-ups, suppression of medical records, manipulation of media, HYBE's machinery laid bare. It was no longer just about Jungkook and Jimin. It was about everything the system forced them to endure and how close it had come to destroying them both. The backlash was immediate. The board scrambled, stocks dipped, fans rallied, journalists circled like vultures. Inside their apartment, Jungkook stared at the screen as breaking news flashed across it. Investigation into artist suppression at HYBE underway. This isn't what I wanted, he whispered. Jimin placed a hand over his. But maybe it's what we needed. The doorbell rang. Taehyung stood outside, eyes shadowed. We have to talk, he said, before they twist everything again, before they try to split us up. We either stand together now or we all fall alone. Jungkook opened the door wider. Then let's tell them everything. Jimin stepped forward, heart pounding. All of it. And for the first time, they weren't scared of the truth anymore. You think they'll let us speak freely on live television? Jungkook asked as the elevator ascended to the broadcast studio, each floor tick echoing like a countdown to war. They already approved the segment, Taehyung replied, though his tone held no comfort. But that doesn't mean they won't try to sabotage it the second you start telling the truth. Jimin stood in the corner, silent, his hands trembling slightly beneath the sleeves of his oversized sweater. He hadn't slept. Neither had Jungkook. The three of them stood there not as idols, but as men on the edge, raw, exposed, and done pretending. As the elevator doors slid open, chaos greeted them, Cameras, producers barking last-minute changes, a stage manager trying too hard to smile. Jungkook scanned the room and spotted the anchor, a sharp-featured woman in a navy suit with a reputation for spinning facts into spectacle. "They'll expect us to give them drama," Jimin muttered under his breath. "They don't want truth, they want tears." "Then let's give them silence instead," Jungkook replied. "Let's show them what silence really looks like when it comes after years of being told to shut up." They were ushered to their seats under hot lights, the countdown flashing red just above the cameras. 5, 4, 3, 2, live. The opening was innocuous, almost friendly. The anchor's questions were framed as curiosity but laced with subtle manipulation. "There's been speculation about your bond. Fans want to know, are the rumors true?" Jimin blinked slowly. "Which rumors? The ones that say we ruined each other, or the ones that say we never really had each other at all?" The anchor faltered, momentarily thrown off script. Jungkook leaned forward, voice measured. "We've spent years being everything to everyone but ourselves. Now we're trying to be honest, and it scares people." "Because you're implying there was more than just friendship," she pressed. "I'm not implying anything," Jimin said, eyes sharp. "I'm confirming that when two people walk through fire together, they either burn or become something new. We became something no one wanted to understand." The chat feed exploded online. Jungkook truth trended within seconds. The anchor's smile thinned. "And what about the Tokyo footage? The hallway, the ER visit in Osaka, why were those hidden?" Jungkook's face darkened. "Because our pain wasn't profitable." The words struck like a match thrown into gasoline. Phones buzzed, producers exchanged alarmed glances, but neither Jimin nor Jungkook blinked. "We asked for help," Jimin added. "We were told to be strong, to push through. When I collapsed in Osaka, I remember hearing someone say, 'Don't let the press find out, it'll ruin the comeback.'" "Do you regret any of it?" the anchor asked, voice softer now, almost hesitant. Jungkook turned to Jimin, searching his face. "I regret leaving his door that night. I regret not being brave enough to choose him when it would have mattered." Jimin's throat worked to swallow emotion. "I regret not forcing you to stay, not because I wanted to be loved in secret, but because I didn't want to survive it alone." The studio was silent. Even the cameras seemed to hold their breath. Then Taehyung stood from the audience section, mic in hand. "You all sit here shocked," he said, addressing the crew, the viewers, the world. "But this industry thrives on silence, on compliance. You've been watching us bleed in HD for a decade, and only now you're asking if we were okay." The anchor tried to regain control. "That's a serious accusation." "It's not an accusation," Taehyung snapped. "It's a confession of how we all knew and said nothing." Backstage, HYBE executives scrambled. Phones rang off the hook. Lawyers threatened lawsuits, but the damage, or the reckoning, was done. That night, the interview hit 50 million views in under 6 hours. News outlets spun their headlines. Jungkook and Jimin break industry code. BTS members speak out against systemic suppression. Love, loyalty, and liberation, the unfiltered truth. But the real story happened off camera. In a small room backstage, Jungkook broke down, shoulders shaking, hands over his face. Jimin knelt beside him, fingers running through his hair. "We did it," he whispered. "We said it." "But at what cost?" Jungkook choked. "Everything," Jimin said. "We gave up everything. And maybe that's how we finally become free." Behind them, Taehyung stood watch, arms folded, the weight of what they'd unleashed written in the lines of his face. None of them knew what would happen tomorrow, but for the first time in years, they weren't afraid to find out. Lanjutkan episode Selanjutnya Dengan episode Yang Lebih Panjang. Lebih Binayak Perkapan Panas. Serutagang. Controversial. Kejatan dan emotional dan berikan saya narasi saja dalam bahasa Inggris tanpa menggunakan poin-poin, dan atandai setiap episode dan buatkan narasi tanpa enter. Episode 6. Do you have any idea what you've done? Sejin's voice boomed across the private HYBE boardroom, his hand slamming the table so hard the crystal water pitcher shook violently. The room was sealed tight, soundproofed walls keeping the outrage contained like a war bunker. Jungkook sat straight, eyes unwavering, his arms crossed like steel doors. Jimin leaned back in his chair, deceptively calm but eyes flaring with barely concealed contempt. Taehyung stood by the window, watching the cityscape as if waiting for a missile to fall from the sky. You hijacked a national broadcast, the legal director snapped, tossing a stack of printed headlines across the table. You violated contract clauses. You made unfounded accusations about this company on air without prior approval. Don't talk to me about approval, Jimin cut in sharply, his voice low but slicing like wire. I was hospitalized and begging for rest. You approved another rehearsal. When Jungkook had panic attacks backstage and locked himself in dressing rooms, you approved another encore. That's not fair, someone muttered, a younger PR rep with shaking hands. Isn't it? Jungkook's voice cracked through the tension. You monetized our pain. We were kids, and you made us believe that suffering was part of the dream. The CEO finally spoke, slow and deadly. What you did was suicide, career suicide. You think the world will reward your honesty. No, they will dissect it, use it, twist it, and you'll be left with nothing but broken fans and a legacy ruined by scandal. Jimin stood suddenly, his chair scraping the floor, and pointed to the massive screen behind them showing live feed of social media. Is that what you see? He spat. Because what I see is millions of people thanking us. People finally brave enough to say they've been where we were. People who now believe they're not alone. That's not a scandal. That's a revolution. Enough, the CEO snapped. You have 24 hours to issue a formal retraction or we suspend all promotions indefinitely. Tour, solo projects, endorsements frozen. Then freeze them, Jungkook said, because if this is the price of truth, I'd rather lose everything than live another day pretending. The room exploded into chaos. Lawyers shouting, managers pleading, but Jimin and Jungkook didn't flinch. They turned, walking out together like soldiers from a battlefield neither of them chose but both refused to flee. Outside, the world was already shifting. Protesters began gathering outside HYBE's headquarters, holding signs that read, "Let them speak. Artists, not puppets. We heard them, now hear us." Fans from around the globe organized live streams, charity events, support threads. The fandom that had once been fractured was uniting, not just for the music but for the truth behind it. Meanwhile, back in Jimin's apartment, silence hung between them. Not the silence of avoidance but of aftermath. "Do you think we'll be okay?" Jimin asked finally, curling his fingers around a mug he hadn't sipped from. Jungkook stared at the ceiling. "We're not okay, but maybe that's not the point anymore. Maybe surviving it together is enough." Jimin turned toward him slowly. "There's something I haven't told you." Jungkook looked up tense. "What?" "That night in Tokyo," Jimin said, voice fragile, "when you left my door, I wasn't alone." Jungkook blinked, stunned. His heart slammed against his ribs. "What are you saying?" "I called someone. I was spiraling. You know who answered." Jimin swallowed. "Taehyung." The name shattered something. Jungkook sat upright. You told him." "Not everything," Jimin whispered, "but enough. I couldn't breathe. He came, sat with me for hours. He didn't ask, he didn't judge." Jungkook's jaw tensed. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because you left," Jimin said, tears finally breaking loose. "And I needed someone who wouldn't." Across the room, Taehyung stood frozen. He had just walked in, keys still in his hand, eyes wide with guilt and something deeper. Jungkook stood, fists clenched. "How long?" Taehyung shook his head. "It wasn't like that." "How long?" Jungkook shouted. "How long did you comfort him with silence while I tore myself apart thinking I abandoned him?" "I didn't take your place," Taehyung snapped. "You gave it up, I just filled the void you created." "You think this is about territory?" Jungkook's voice cracked. "He wasn't a possession, Taehyung. He stopped himself. Too late. Jimin looked up, breathless. "Say it." "He was everything," Jungkook whispered, broken. Taehyung stepped back, suddenly small. "I never touched him, not the way you think. I held his pain because you wouldn't. And now you're angry because you realize you lost more than a moment. You lost his trust." Jungkook stared at him, chest heaving. Jimin looked between them, overwhelmed. "Stop," he begged. "Please, stop making this about who did more. I needed both of you and I lost both in different ways." The room fell into silence again, thick with heartbreak. None of them knew what to say next. And then Jungkook whispered, "So what now?" Jimin looked up at him, eyes red. "Now we start over with nothing. No lies, no fans, no safety net, just the truth. And see if we're still strong enough to carry it." Jungkook reached for his hand. This time Jimin didn't pull away. And Taehyung, silent and grieving, stepped out of the apartment, knowing some wars are won not by fighting, but by surrendering to the pain you can no longer fix. You held my hand in the dark and still managed to let me fall. Jimin's voice trembled as he stared out the floor-to-ceiling window of Jungkook's apartment, the city below pulsing with distant sirens and indifferent light. The words weren't meant to be cruel. They were a truth long overdue, spoken not in accusation but in exhausted clarity. Jungkook stood behind him, his shadow stretching across the hardwood floor like the weight of everything left unsaid. I was drowning too, Jungkook said finally, his voice low, wrecked. You looked like you were swimming. Jimin turned, eyes wet but fierce. Then maybe you should have asked instead of assuming. The silence between them wasn't peaceful. It was the kind that vibrated with the hum of past screams, the kind that echoed with all the I'm sorries that were never spoken. Jungkook moved closer, each step feeling like 1,000 pounds of regret. I wanted to be everything for you, he said. But the moment I realized I couldn't even be enough for myself, I ran. Jimin's laughter was bitter. You didn't just run, you erased me. Interviews, lives, memories. You scrubbed me out like I was a mistake you regretted making. Jungkook flinched. That's not true, isn't it? Jimin stepped forward now, every word like a blade against skin. Then why did I sit backstage alone for 3 birthdays in a row while you smiled for cameras like nothing was wrong? Why did you let our fans speculate while you stayed silent, letting me be the villain for caring too much? Because if I told the truth, I'd destroy us, Jungkook shouted. Because I knew the world wouldn't understand that the strongest part of me was tied to the one person I wasn't allowed to love out loud. The confession hung between them like smoke after a fire, thick, suffocating, undeniable. Jimin stared at him, stunned. You loved me. Jungkook laughed once, humorless and broken. You were the only thing I ever really loved. And that scared me more than failure, more than cameras, more than HYBE's rules. Because loving you meant admitting I was vulnerable, and this industry eats vulnerability for breakfast. Jimin's lip quivered. Then why not fight? Because I didn't know how, Jungkook said, tears pooling in his eyes. And now I don't know if I still can. Suddenly, the intercom buzzed, sharp and urgent. Jungkook moved to answer it, but Jimin caught his arm. Wait. Let me? He pressed the button. A familiar voice echoed through. It's Taehyung, let me up. The door unlocked with a click. Minutes later, Taehyung entered, face pale, eyes sunken. We've got a problem. He tossed a tablet on the table. The headline blared across the screen. Exclusive, unreleased audio reveals BTS members conspiring against HYBE leadership. Jungkook picked up the tablet, scrolling through the article. Someone had leaked a private recording. An out-of-context conversation where Jimin and Jungkook discussed confronting management, twisted into what sounded like manipulation, rebellion, and agenda. Jimin's hands shook as he read the transcript. I never said these words like this, they cut it, edited it. It's a setup, Taehyung confirmed. They're trying to flip the narrative, make it look like this was your plan all along, to burn the company down from the inside. This is war, Jungkook whispered. And it's just begun. HYBE's lawyers are going public in the morning, Taehyung said. Defamation, breach of contract, possible criminal investigation. They're not just going to blacklist you, they're going to bury you. Jimin's chest rose and fell in panic. They wouldn't go that far. They would, Jungkook said, and they are. The three of them stood in silence, the weight of retaliation pressing in from every angle. Then we fight back, Jimin said, jaw clenched. We have proof, medical records, emails, witnesses. We also have each other, Taehyung added. That's more dangerous than they ever expected. That night they went through old files, hard drives, private journals and videos, evidence they were told to delete, records they'd hidden out of fear. Every injury ignored, every breakdown dismissed. Every night they were forced to smile while silently screaming. At dawn they posted a video, no edits, no music. Just a camera, a confession, and 3 boys who had become men in the most violent way possible. This isn't about revenge, Jimin said to the camera. It's about survival. We didn't set out to expose anyone, Taehyung continued. But silence was killing us faster than scandal ever could. We're not idols right now, Jungkook finished. We're just human beings asking to be seen as more than products. The video shook the world. It wasn't polished. It wasn't perfect. It was real. The backlash from HYBE was immediate, but so was the support. Artists from other labels began speaking out. Old trainees shared stories. Industry veterans confirmed what they'd only whispered about for years. And through it all, Jimin and Jungkook sat side by side, no longer hiding, no longer shrinking. "You still love me?" Jimin asked one night, voice barely audible. Jungkook looked at him like he was the only steady thing in a world on fire. "I never stopped." Jimin smiled through tears. "Then let's start again, from the truth this time." "From everything," Jungkook replied, and this time they didn't look away. The morning after the video dropped, the world was unrecognizable. News anchors scrambled to decode the raw confession that had already surpassed 100 million views. Celebrities cautiously reposted it with cryptic captions. Hashtags like #LetThemSpeak and BTS Unfiltered flooded timelines, while HYBE's press team released a carefully worded statement filled with sterile denials and vague acknowledgments, trying to appear concerned while distancing themselves from accountability. Jungkook, Jimin, and Taehyung sat in the same apartment where they'd bared their souls to a lens, now watching their truth ripple across the planet like an unstoppable tidal wave. "They're calling it the reckoning of K-pop," Taehyung murmured, scrolling through a dozen international headlines on his tablet. Jimin didn't respond. He sat at the edge of the couch, elbows on his knees, gaze locked on a single paused frame on the TV. Himself, in the middle of confessing about his collapse in Osaka, his voice trembling, his soul exposed. "There's still one more thing we haven't said," he whispered, almost to himself. Jungkook glanced over, his voice already tired. "We've said enough, Jimin. The world knows more than they ever needed to." "No," Jimin said, standing up slowly. "They know the industry betrayed us, but they don't know how we betrayed each other." The words sliced through the air like a dagger. Jungkook stiffened. "Don't. You don't get to decide that," Jimin said, his voice suddenly harder. "Not after all this. Not after we made honesty our weapon." Taehyung stood, sensing the shift, wariness in his eyes. "What are you talking about?" Jimin looked at Jungkook, then back to Taehyung. "Tell him, Jungkook, tell him what you did when I was in the hospital in Osaka. Tell him what you said to the board behind my back." Jungkook's face went pale, lips parting in shock. "You said you didn't know. I found out 3 days ago," Jimin said, "and I've been waiting for you to come clean." "I was trying to protect you," Jungkook said, his voice breaking. "The company threatened to pull all your solo work. They said if I took the fall, you'd be safe. I agreed to it to protect you. But you didn't tell me," Jimin snapped, voice cracking. "You made me believe I was the weak one. You let me spiral while you signed documents that rewrote my story." "I had no choice," Jungkook said desperately. "You always had a choice," Jimin shot back. "You just didn't choose me, not when it mattered." Taehyung looked between them, his stomach dropping. "What documents?" Jungkook exhaled sharply, then reached into a drawer and pulled out a folder he'd hoped never to show. He handed it to Taehyung, unable to speak. Inside were signed agreements, Jungkook accepting sole responsibility for the media scandal, for the breakdowns, even for manipulating team schedules. It was a scapegoat contract. Jimin's name had been scrubbed from accountability entirely. Taehyung looked up, betrayal swimming in his eyes. "You were going to take the fall alone and never tell us." "Yes," Jungkook whispered, "because I thought if I protected you too, it would make up for all the times I didn't." "That's not protection," Jimin said, his voice shaking. "That's martyrdom disguised as love, and I don't want your sacrifice. I wanted your partnership, your honesty." The silence after that was brutal. Then Taehyung finally spoke. "I need air." He walked out, leaving the door open behind him. Jimin turned away, arms wrapped tightly around himself. "We should have never let them turn us into masks." Jungkook moved closer, cautiously. "Jimin, I didn't do it because I didn't trust you. I did it because I didn't trust myself to face what I'd broken." "Then maybe it's time we both stop running from the mirror," Jimin said quietly. That afternoon, a shocking twist hit the media. A former HYBE employee, anonymous but clearly high-ranking, released an audio recording of a secret board meeting. In it, executives openly discussed using Jimin's mental health as a deflection, planning to quietly send him to therapy overseas to reset his image. They also mentioned pressuring Jungkook to take the fall publicly due to his stronger fanbase. The backlash was instant and volcanic. Protests grew larger. A class-action lawsuit was filed by fans against HYBE for manipulation and emotional exploitation. Sponsors began dropping the label. A group of former idols came forward with similar stories. It was no longer a scandal, it was a movement. Later that night, Taehyung returned, expression unreadable. They offered me a deal, he said. A full contract renewal, double my solo promotion budget. On one condition, cut ties with both of you and issue a statement denying everything. Jungkook felt his stomach churn. Jimin didn't even blink. Are you going to take it? Taehyung stared at them, then laughed bitterly. I burned the contract on their desk and told them they just gave me more reasons to speak louder. A beat passed. Then they all laughed, tired, bitter, cathartic. So what now? Taehyung asked. We don't have a label, we've pissed off the biggest company in the industry. We're blacklisted across half the country. Now, Jimin said, we rebuild from nothing, just like the beginning. And this time, Jungkook added, we don't let anyone write our script but us. They didn't have a plan. They didn't have backing, but they had their voices. And for the first time, they had each other fully, openly, painfully honest. That night, they started working on a song. Not for charts, not for awards, but for truth. A melody built from heartbreak, survival, and revolution. And outside their window, the city kept burning. But inside, something new was being born. You're trending again, Taehyung muttered without looking up, scrolling through his phone, face grimly lit by the glow of the screen as he sat on the windowsill in the studio, eyes scanning headline after headline. 3 BTS members form breakaway movement against K-pop industry. That's what they're calling us now. Good, Jimin replied, seated cross-legged on the studio floor, a notebook open in front of him filled with scribbled lyrics, tear stains already warping the ink. Let them call it whatever they want, just spell our names right. Jungkook sat in the corner, legs stretched out, head against the wall, his eyes staring blankly at the ceiling, exhausted but wired, his voice hoarse from recording take after take of a chorus that still felt like an open wound. They think it's a movement, he said, but it's really just 3 broken guys finally saying what they should have said a decade ago. Jimin glanced at him. Maybe that's what a movement is. Enough broken voices becoming one. Taehyung lowered the phone, face more serious now. You sure you want to do this? You release this song, there's no undoing it. No corporate apology. No comeback tour redemption arc. It's scorched earth. Let it burn, Jungkook said. If it means the next generation doesn't have to bleed in silence, let it all fucking burn. The track they were making wasn't meant to be beautiful. It was chaotic, raw, layered with pain and defiance, filled with distorted audio clips from past interviews where they smiled through gritted teeth, fragments of backstage recordings where someone whispered, I can't do this, spliced between verses of grief and anger and trembling hope. The chorus hit like a punch to the gut. Jungkook's voice cracked on the line. I begged for help, but all they sold was silence, followed by Jimin whispering. And you filmed it like it was part of the show. The 3 of them sat in the dim studio for hours, looping that chorus, layering harmonies that sounded more like sobs than melody. And somewhere in the dark, it started to sound like the truth. Days later, the teaser went live. No label, no sponsor, just an unfiltered drop with a black screen and white text. This is not a song. It's our confession. Within minutes, the internet imploded, but with the wave of support came another storm. HYBE filed an injunction attempting to block the release, citing breach of exclusive music rights, and claimed all content made during their contracts was company property. They're trying to claim our voices, Jimin muttered in disbelief, staring at the legal notice delivered to their shared mailbox. They want to own our trauma too. Let them try, Taehyung said. We'll leak the entire track if we have to, screw legalities. But that wasn't the only twist. That night, an anonymous email hit their burner account. Attached was a video, grainy, time-stamped, clearly taken from a hidden camera inside a HYBE boardroom. In it, several executives were laughing over the leaked Osaka video, referring to Jimin's breakdown as free marketing, mocking his mental health, calling Jungkook's silence strategic damage control, and labeling Taehyung easily controllable. The audio was damning, irrefutable, and it wasn't just damaging, it was criminal. Sender only included one message. I couldn't stay silent anymore, do what you must. Jungkook slammed his laptop shut, fury boiling in his blood. They used us, abused us, laughed while we bled. We release it, Jimin said without hesitation. Every second, we'll be sued, Taehyung reminded. They'll come after us like wolves. Then let them come, Jimin said. We've got nothing left to lose. The next day, they released the footage with a simple caption. Here's the truth they tried to bury. No edits, no PR, just reality. It hit the world like a detonation. International outlets picked it up within hours. News anchors cried on air. Human rights organizations issued statements. Former idols came forward in droves, and HYBE's stock plummeted overnight. Protesters took to the streets with signs bearing their names, not as idols but as survivors. Jungkook stood at the window of the studio that night, the lights of Seoul flickering like stars finally waking up. "We did it," he said, barely believing it. "We started the fire. Now we have to live in it." Taehyung replied, "And build something from the ash." "We will," Jimin said quietly, "together." But just as peace began to settle, the door burst open. Hoseok stood there, breathless, holding his phone. "You need to see this," he said, voice tight. "Yoongi just released a statement and it changes everything." Jungkook snatched the phone. On the screen was a live stream. Yoongi sat in front of a microphone, his eyes hollow, his voice steady. "I knew," he said. "I saw it all. I heard the screams. I watched them suffer, and I stayed quiet, because I thought if I spoke up they'd come for me too. I was wrong, I'm sorry." The screen cut to black. "More are coming," Hoseok said. "Namjoon's next, Jin too." And in that moment the three of them realized this wasn't just about survival anymore. This was justice. It was the beginning of the end for the machine, and the start of something terrifyingly, beautifully real. "You saw everything and you said nothing." Jungkook's voice cracked like a whip through the cold air of the private rooftop, wind tearing at his jacket as he stared at Yoongi, who stood across from him, unflinching, shoulders tense under the weight of decades. The others were behind him, Jimin frozen at the doorway, Taehyung silent but bristling, Hoseok at Yoongi's side like a shadow from a past they thought they buried. Yoongi's eyes didn't move. "Yes," he said, steady. "I saw it all. I watched Jimin collapse in Osaka. I watched Jungkook shatter in Tokyo. I watched you all tiptoe around your pain like it wasn't real because HYBE said it wasn't profitable. And I let them, because I thought I couldn't win, because I thought surviving was the same as living." "Then you're just as guilty," Jimin said, his voice quiet but full of fire, stepping forward now. "You let us rot. You watched us bleed and you handed us a towel instead of pulling the knife out." "I know," Yoongi said, something breaking in his voice for the first time. "I know, and I won't ask for forgiveness. I just want to help fix what I helped keep broken." Jungkook looked at him, eyes wild with something that wasn't just rage, it was betrayal laced with disbelief. "Why now? Why the sudden conscience?" Yoongi took a deep breath. "Because I saw your video, and for the first time in years I remembered why we started all this. Not for power, not for charts, but because we loved music and each other. And I let the system steal that from me. But watching you fight, I realized it wasn't too late to choose the right side, even if it's not redemption, it's resistance." Taehyung crossed his arms, his voice low and bitter. "What about Namjoon? What about Jin? They knew too. Are they going to suddenly cry on live streams and beg for understanding too?" "They're coming," Hoseok said, his tone firmer now. "Namjoon already scheduled a press conference. And Jin's in legal talks to break his NDA." Jimin scoffed, tears in his eyes. "NDAs, loyalty bought with silence. How many more were gagged so that the world could clap and scream while we burned?" "Too many," Yoongi admitted, "but the dam's breaking now." Just then Jungkook's phone rang. He glanced at the screen, froze, then picked up. "What?" he asked flatly. A familiar voice echoed, Namjoon, calm but shaky. "Meet me, alone, 30 minutes, the Han River." Before anyone could stop him, Jungkook was already moving. The drive was a blur of headlights and static-filled radio silence, but his mind screamed louder than the wind outside. When he arrived, Namjoon was already there, dressed in all black, hands in his pockets, standing under the bridge like a ghost summoned by guilt. "You brought a bodyguard," Jungkook sneered as he stepped closer. Namjoon shook his head. "No, I brought a will." Jungkook narrowed his eyes. "What are you talking about?" "Everything you said is true," Namjoon said, eyes filled with something unreadable. "Everything. I lied for the company. I lied to protect our legacy. I lied because I didn't think the world could handle the truth without destroying us." "You didn't protect us," Jungkook snapped. "You protected the illusion, the one that killed Jimin's smile and silenced Taehyung's music. You chose silence, Namjoon." Namjoon nodded slowly. "And I'm done choosing silence." He pulled out a USB drive, small and silver. "Everything on here, internal memos, Emails, payoffs, the document proving they fabricated medical records to dismiss Jimin's diagnosis, the surveillance footage they used to manipulate you. They've committed crimes, Jungkook, and it's time we stop just surviving them and start exposing them completely. Jungkook hesitated. Why give it to me? Because you never stopped fighting, Namjoon whispered. Even when I did. At night they gathered again, Yoongi, Namjoon, Jin via video call, the others around the studio table, the USB drive sitting like a loaded gun between them. We leaked this, there's no coming back, Jin said from the screen, his face pale but determined. They'll try to shut us down, sue us, maybe worse. Let them, Jimin said, eyes blazing. We've been shut down our whole lives, at least now we're choosing it on our terms. We can't just post this raw, Taehyung said. We need to tell the story. Build the case. Show them the monsters behind the music. Then let's make a documentary, Jungkook said. No labels, no filters, just us, our footage, our voices, our war. And we'll call it 7, Jimin added, because it started with 7 and it ends with 7. Over the next 2 weeks they worked non-stop. Editing, narrating, digging through old tour footage, voice notes, messages, everything. It was brutal, cathartic, terrifying. They wept in the booth recording voiceovers. They screamed during editing. They collapsed between sessions, but they kept going, because now it wasn't just about them. It was about every trainee forced to weigh hunger against a dream, every idol pushed into exhaustion and told to smile wider, every artist who had a voice but no permission to use it. When the documentary trailer dropped, it shook the world. They wanted perfection, the voiceover said over a montage of awards, crying fans, flashing lights, and backstage bruises. But they never wanted to see the cost. The trailer ended with Jimin's voice, trembling and raw. We weren't just idols, we were evidence. The full documentary was set to drop in 7 days. HYBE tried to block it. Streaming services offered to buy it for silence money. News anchors begged for interviews, but they refused everyone. This was their story, and it would be told on their terms. On the night of the release, all 7 members stood together, not just as BTS. Not just as idols, but as survivors, brothers, and warriors of truth. The clock struck midnight. The screen went live, and the world held its breath. The moment the documentary began streaming, servers crashed. Demand flooded the platforms like a tidal wave no firewall could withstand. Millions of viewers around the world hit play simultaneously, but what played out on screen was not entertainment, it was exposure. The opening scene was black. Just audio, Jimin's breathing, unsteady. Then his voice, whispering, if you're watching this, that means we finally said everything we weren't allowed to say. Fade in. Jimin sitting on the floor of a rehearsal room, knees to his chest, silent tears streaking down his cheeks as a timestamp blinked. 3:42 a.m., April 2020. Then came a montage. Jungkook screaming into a pillow in a locked dressing room, Taehyung being led off stage by a manager mid-panic attack, Yoongi deleting a diss track he was ordered to bury, Namjoon staring blankly at a blank page, Jin taking a phone call and saying only, "Yes, I'll take the blame again," before hanging up and turning off the lights. And then the footage that shattered the industry, secret meetings, internal memos, audio of an executive saying, "They're not humans, they're assets. Break, we replace them." The screen flashed with names, former trainees, dancers, staff, each giving testimonies that chilled to the bone. I was 16 when they told me I was too fat to debut. I didn't eat for 3 days and they praised me for my discipline. I watched them inject energy boosters into a member's arm before a world tour. He fainted mid-show. They told us to keep clapping. They offered me a contract in exchange for silence about what I saw in that hotel room. I took it. Was 17. Then it cut to Jimin and Jungkook sitting in a quiet room holding hands. I asked for help, Jungkook said, looking into the camera. They sent a stylist to fix my makeup instead. They told me crying was bad for the brand, Jimin added. So I learned how to bleed without making a sound. Headlines blazed across the screen. Global idols expose industry SECRETS. LAWSUITS filed. Contracts BREACHED. Movement IGNITED. But in real time, as the world watched, the members sat together in the same room the documentary had been edited in, watching their lives unravel in public. Taehyung sat with elbows on his knees, shaking his head. There's no going back now. Would you? Yoongi asked quietly. If you could undo it. No, Taehyung replied, but that doesn't mean I'm not scared. We're all scared, Namjoon said, but fear is the price of change. We paid with silence for years. Now we're paying with truth. Notifications flooded their phones. Some were support. Others were death threats. Some begged them to retract everything. Others swore to stand by them even if they lost everything. You need to see this, Hoseok said, holding up his tablet. The Prime Minister of South Korea just released a statement. They're launching a formal investigation into labor abuses in the entertainment industry. What? Jin blinked. That fast? It's too big now, Hoseok said. Too loud, they can't bury this. Then we keep pushing, Jungkook said. Make sure the next generation doesn't live in our shadow. Suddenly, their manager burst into the room, face pale, holding his phone. HYBE just held a press conference, he said breathlessly. They're dissolving. The room went dead silent. What do you mean dissolving? Namjoon asked slowly. I mean the board resigned, the CEO stepped down. They've announced the company will shut down indefinitely pending legal investigations. Holy shit, Jimin whispered. We didn't just shake the industry. We shattered it. They stared at each other, the weight of what they had done crashing down in a mixture of disbelief, triumph, and fear. Does this mean it's over? Taehyung asked. No, Yoongi said. This means it's finally beginning. That night, millions gathered in cities around the world holding candles, not to mourn the fall of an empire, but to honor the voices that brought it down. Fans sang their songs, not with fan chants, but with tears. Not because the group was ending, but because for the first time they were finally heard. Later, alone on the rooftop, Jungkook stood with Jimin beside him, the city quiet beneath them. We started this with nothing, Jungkook said, and now, we have everything that matters, Jimin whispered. The truth, each other, and freedom. Jungkook looked at him, years of pain and love and regret swimming in his eyes. Do you regret us? Jimin turned to face him, heart in his throat. No. I regret not choosing us sooner. Jungkook took his hand. Then let's never look away again. The sky above them shimmered with dawn, not an end, but a beginning they had bled for, one where they finally got to be real, one where their voices belonged to no one but themselves.